going for a copyright strike actually last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Back to my stock music. Okay, we're live. This is exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live stream. My name's Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here in Australia. I'm joined tonight with another special guest, and I've had quite a few on the show. Sacha, welcome. Welcome, Sacha Nourse, to the channel.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty psyched to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I've been wanting to get you on the live streams for a fair while now, and you've been quite busy with your own lives as well over at Beneath Driver Lane. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. So we've been doing weekly streams since COVID started. I mean, I haven't quite racked up the 500 in a row or whatever you've done, Matt. But we're up to about week 14, which is great, and it's been really fun. But it's also depressing because we're inadvertently tracking how long we've been in lockdown for, and seeing that number go up one per week is a bit harrowing, you know. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to do entertaining things, and kind of what I was talking about earlier with you off stream is what we're trying to provide is there's a lot of places to find dense whiskey information and to go really deep into production methods and that sort of stuff. And I really love that. I really thrive in that sort of environment. But what I think is refreshing for people is, well, let's have the conversation that you'll have if you go into a bar and you sit down and you start talking to the person next to you, and then the bartender and the two people sitting at the bar start having a bit of a joke and laughing and talking about cocktails and beers and funny stories and that sort of thing. So it's mostly about the crack, if you will, than kind of hardcore nerdy information. Yeah,
absolutely. Robert's replying to an earlier comment from Hey Cool, who saying that he did get that care package over from Glen Murray from Elgin all the way to Melbourne. Elgin to Melbourne, there you go.
Yeah, I'm actually. Oh no, I'm not. I have the Glen Murray Glen can. Hold on, give me 1 second. Let me get the Glen Murray Glen can.
Okay. If you want to, yeah. In the meantime, folks, I'm actually going to pour a 35.254 Pure Decadence. This is exciting, and this is a nice decadent whiskey in itself. An 11-year-old Festivals cast. It's very exciting. Evening, James Finnegan. Hope you're well, mate. Mark Teague, Rob Akers. And there's there it is. There's the Glen Murray Glen can, and I'll join you for a for a Glen Murray yourself as well, Sacha. This is exciting. So
yes,
let's start at the beginning. For everyone who's tuned in and watching along tonight. Let's have a chat about your history. Mm-hmm. I consider you. I'm going to just preface this by saying I consider you a bit of a stalwart, if you like, of the Australian spirits industry, and someone
wow.
And you've seen it. You've seen a lot of things in the years in the development of that industry, and I want to just let's give people a bit of background. Where did it all begin for you? What was your role or interest in it? Where did that all start?
Well, I kind of got into whiskey. I got into cocktails first. So I started working in bars when I was 20. So 9.5, almost 10 years ago. And I kind of fell in love with spirits first. And it was actually, and I'm going to get lynched on your channel for this, but it was actually gin. The gin got me into spirits first, because I think gin.
I found gins we've been bottling, man. There's no.
Good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. Yeah. But yeah, you know, I got interested in flavor, and I've always really enjoyed cooking. So I found cocktails the drinking extension of cooking. Did cocktail bars for a little while, and like restaurants and a whole heap of beer bars, everything. And then ended up working with everyone's good friend Paul Slater. At an Australian spirits bar in Brunswick called Amelia Shaw. And then he would
a different bar name just then. I've never even heard of Amelia Shaw.
Well, see, this is the thing. it's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, and there's a lot of reasons why, and they're not worth going into the reasons why it kind of didn't really get the publicity that I think it deserved. But then Paul went to work for Starwood. I went and did some other things, and then I ended up at Starwood as well with Paul. So it's probably been the last 6 or 7 years that I've been working closely with Australian spirits, and then more recently just Australian whiskey, and now all whiskey, which is very exciting for me again.
And we're going to just grab that comment from Scott Fitzsimons. Thank you, Scotty. All whiskey is overaged, unflavored gin. Thanks, Scotty. Always on point.
Scotty,
this one's for you.
So
you're at a place called Amelia Shore. Your friend Paul Slater from there, which you and I are both mutual friends with. He then sort of he worked his way over to Starwood, and you followed after him. You sort of followed footsteps over there, or
so I mean, like I went and worked at a couple of restaurants after that because I was still undecided what kind of path I was going to follow. I was doing an arts and teaching degree at that point, and I hadn't really committed to one thing or the other yet. But after a couple more years of studying part-time and not really enjoying it, I decided to kind of go all in on kind of spirits and whiskey. So took a job working part-time at the Starwood bar because Paul became the brand ambassador.
And we're talking Essendon now, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was at the first distillery. Yeah. So I was working at the first distillery in Essendon.
Now I have to ask you, were you working behind the tiki bar at Essendon?
No. I'm not that old.
Okay. Just I mean, yeah.
No, I was working.
Like for people before that lovely wooden bar top at Starwood eventuated. It was a little one-person tiki pop-up bar. That the fun part was you'd go on this serious tour with the likes of Dave Vitale or Ian at the time as well.
Yeah,
and he'd walk you around and talk you about all the aspects of the distillery, and then, you want to try some Starwoods? Here, come over here, come over to the bar, and he'd stand behind this little tiki bar. With literally just the Solera at the time. This was well before Nova came out, or wine. Sorry.
No, we had some really, really fun times in that old distillery. I was only there for probably 6 months before we moved. But it was funny. I was doing a bump in to the Melbourne show. We just won an award which qualified us to kind of present at the Melbourne show. So we're doing a bump in. We're going to be there for about 10 days. So I bumped into the Melbourne show, and the distillery was perfectly put together. And then by the time Paul and I were bumping out and going back to the distillery, everything was gone. And it was really funny, like taking stuff out, loading up Paul's Subaru, driving up to the showgrounds to set up, and then coming back. And Russell Stubbs and Sam Slaney were trying to pull the bar out without breaking it on like forklifts. And like, it was just it was incredible. It just disappeared. But then
character to that old distillery. And for those watching along, there's this beautiful character of the old Starwood distillery, the first distillery, which was old. I'm going to get this wrong, but at one point it was a cigarette factory, and I believe, and there was the old Benson and Hedges and Winfield stickers still in the bottling hall.
Yeah, that's right.
The old price list.
Yeah,
of a packet of smokes was $1.50. It's like it was still on the wall. And at one point it was a cigarette factory, and then it was vacant for some time. But then Starwood moved in and were distilling there, and it was a very dark space. From memory, it always felt dark inside there, and in some ways. And then you guys had this, and in fact, my history extends to the Essendon days because you had this lovely TV that was in the conference meeting room upstairs.
Yeah.
Which I installed. There you go. So I was working in whiskey at the time, but I was at the distillery, and Dave looked at me and said, "Oh, you can help me install a TV."
Yeah,
and so
classic Dave.
You get put to work.
Yeah,
it was it was great, but it was a lovely place, but obviously it had outgrown itself, and you were obviously integral in the next stage in a way, moving to Port Melbourne.
Yeah. So I mean, so my friend Cameron Bray, he was the head bartender for a year. He and I, oh man, that bar.
There we go. That photo
he and I put that bar together. So Cam's a very, very talented designer. He used to have a steel manufacturing business back in Canberra, and actually a great lineage. He used to manage Hippo & Co., which is my favorite whiskey bar in Canberra.
Great bar. Yeah. Partner bar.
Yeah, absolutely killer bar. So he came over to Melbourne, and we pretty much built that bar together. But I mean, I say Cameron did the vast majority of the work. I just helped him with the little stuff. I mean, Cameron welded all of that back bar together, and there was one night where we'd all been there for about 12 hours, and I had to go home for whatever reason, probably because I was tired, but I think I had plans. And turns out Andrew McDonald, our CEO, Dave Vitale, and Cameron stayed till 2 a.m. and hand put all of those bottles in the back bar. Like, it's it was just an incredible build, and
enormous dedication to the to just the, I guess, the fortitude of building something locally like this, and building something in scale. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I saw this bar, the first time I walked into Port Melbourne, I'd seen photos like this already, concept photos and in-work photos like that. And then when I first walked in, there's a sense of occasion. You're like, wait a second, this is an Australian whiskey distillery, and I could be walking to the visitor centre of Glenlivet or of a big Scotch whiskey distillery. And there was a certain sense of gravitas to it, if you like, and sort of like, wow, I can't believe the Australian whiskey industry's come this far, especially because, in years prior, I'd walked through places like the Shed at Overeem Distillery and whatnot, where it's all just one little still, one person running the still, and that same person who runs the still probably fills the casks as well, and it's like and it was operation.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of stories about the bump in. I mean, let's go back to the old distillery though. The old distillery was, that was the place where sort of everyone, like the team, came up with ginger beer cask. Like, that was when we had time, or the distillers had time to like really experiment with stuff. And ginger beer cask was just Jace Yendall, the head of brewing now. The head of brewing now, who brewed some ginger beer, didn't have anywhere to put it, so put it into a barrel to store it for a little bit, and then put it into a keg and took it home, I think. And then they had this seasoned barrel with ginger beer that had ginger beer in it. So just put some Pera or Solera in that, and that was the genesis of ginger beer cask. And it was just Jace fucking around. Can I swear on your stream?
You can swear on the stream.
Yeah. So Jace fucking around with brewing. Like, I mean, we've had
the cool thing about that, and I remember that first ginger beer release. It was it was a wild beast of a spirit.
It was the worst made of the 5 that they've released.
It was unintegrated. It was all over the shop. The influence on it was lumpy to be complimentary even. Yeah. And yet it was still exciting to drink though, because A, we've never seen this before, and B, this was kind of like, well, I mean, the project's idea was, I love the background behind the projects, which we won't go into tonight, but the whole idea behind those projects were that it was kind of like, what could Australian whiskey become? What could we sort of, where could we stretch this a bit, rather than just, we've got to use this and we've got to use this.
That's right.
But the comment is, what is the favorite whiskey bar in Canberra? We both said Hippo Co. Great bar in Canberra. Yep. Very friendly atmosphere. Great team there. Awesome. And show your society membership card. So
shout out to Lucy, Nick, and Eamon, who were the three people at the kind of helm there. Awesome bartenders, know a lot about booze, and great tastings. I've hosted a couple of tastings there, and they're always just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Scotty says the Essendon site always made the taxi from town back to the airport better. Way more than the airport bar.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But sorry. So tell us, guide us through those next few years in your career. Then this is where we.
Yeah. So I mean, I was
New
working
site.
at new site Starwood. Let's just go post build. We got everything done, but we're kind of just building as we were going, and it was pretty tough. So Cameron and myself were the only employees for the bar, but we were still doing like a few tours, like 2 tours a day, 3 days a week. But it was just kind of carnage. It was really hard work, and we just worked hard. We were working 50, 60-hour weeks, and we were doing it because we believed in what we were doing, and we were working for a great company. And then we could hire people. Then we started hiring some people, and things got a little bit easier. But yeah, it was, I bartended there for a year, and then I sort of got promoted to like head bartender, I guess, which was great. I was doing kind of cocktail creation, training, helping Paul and Alex Hart at this point out with sort of tasting and events and that sort of thing. And then after a little while, I did hospitality training. So I just focused on training our hospitality team, specifically about production and about whiskey in more general terms. And then I guess after that, I was the global brand educator for about 12 months, which was exhausting, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just about to say that. I mean, it's kind of it's essentially a big BA role. It's kind of like I remember both from your end and from talking to Paul Slater about that role, is that it was quite a demanding one, as you said, and it was quite sort of, it's like a lot of hours. It's quite a high stress role in some ways, and I guess and I work as a BA, as you know, as for national here for SMWS, and there's always that sort of that perception, that misconception, about, oh well, it's just you just must drink whiskey all day or whatever kind of lines. And it's like, no, global brand educator it's a full on role of education and planning and assessment and strategy that it doesn't really come into it.
Yeah, look, it was essentially my job. It changed a few times. The company was going through a bit of flux at that point, and what I was originally
growing pains.
Yeah, what I was originally hired for and what I ended up doing were pretty different. But look, it was great. I learned a lot. I got to work with some really great people and some people which taught me a lot about things that I need to work on. Because I mean, like, look, my background's storytelling and entertaining and kind of public speaking. That's what I did. So I learned a lot of new skills in that role, and I'm very grateful for it. But at the end, I was just kind of burnt out and didn't feel like I was performing how I should be. Yeah. So I thought, it's better I step down and let someone fresh come into the company and attack it with the enthusiasm that I did 5 years before, because that's probably what they need right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, we're seeing a lot of Australian distilleries actually take on more and more ambassadorial and educator roles, and because especially for a category that isn't as well understood as an established category like Scotch whiskey is, like Irish whiskey is, like American whiskey is. They've certainly had a head start by sometimes hundreds of years to establish the credibility and the learnings around it. What do you think what do you think the challenges are for even for a brand like what you worked for, like for Starwood, to sort of grow in that space? How do they approach that? Is that like a BA situation, or is that tastings? Is there a few angles that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really complex question. I think internally, if you look at just Australia, we already have quite a high level understanding, especially the whiskey community in Australia already has a pretty high level understanding of what to expect for Australian whiskey. Yeah. So I think because of a lot of the work which lots of great brands have done in Australia, people know about how climate's going to affect maturation, how, barrel size and barrel treatment's going to affect final product. I I would say the biggest challenge in the early days was introducing to people the idea that just because a whiskey is 4 years old, 3 years old, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And trying to convey that if you're going to make a 3-year-old whiskey, you start from the beginning and you craft a 3-year-old whiskey. Like, you know, if you want to create a 15-year-old whiskey in Scotland, you start from the beginning and you create a 15-year-old whiskey. The example I always use is if you taste Lafroig Spirit, it's pretty average. But if you taste Lafroig after 8 years of maturation, it's delicious. And they know that at Lafroig. They know that releasing 4-year-old Lafroig is probably not going to please anyone. So they don't really do it. They only release 8 to 10-year-old Lafroig at kind of the youngest, you know? So
it's funny you say that. We're just about to see a 5-year-old core range Ardbeg as well, aren't we? There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like that again, they've probably taken a lot into account and considered what they're making, and they're designing that whiskey. And that's what people don't I think sometimes don't think about. And that was hard to translate in the beginning. I think how we grow as a category, especially internationally, because I mean, that's the next frontier of Australian whiskey. And, you know, thank you, Sullivan's Cove. That made working over in the UK and over in France so much easier, because we can be like, look, Australian whiskey's winning awards. We're winning awards. Try our whiskey. And once you taste it, I think people like it. So it's getting people to buy in enough to just taste something. And then I think you go from there.
There's a great comment here. I'll kind of come back to that, Sacha. There's a great comment here from Scotty again, who says, at the time, Sacha was the only global BA for an Aussie whiskey company. Basically the first introduction to any Aussie whiskey for many people around the world. Big shout out.
Scotty said that to me before, and I thank Scotty so much for the praise. But I mean, you know, we had Dave Vitale, Alex Hart, Paul Slater, all doing this sort of stuff. I only did last year. I only ended up doing 2 international trips. So I did 2 international trips. I did a lot of Australian kind of trips. I'm working with our distributors here. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Scotty. But I feel like people were doing that before me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big shout out to you either way. I think a very well deserved one, actually.
Thank you. I'm trying to be better at taking compliments as opposed to being like, no, fuck you, which is my normal response.
Yeah, sure. Just on that point of how the category grows, I had a great conversation recently with Dr. Sam Simmons, who was and we had him on a live stream for Society, and it was he was talking about how the focus and approach of whiskey now as a category needs to be much more focused on flavor.
Yes.
And rather than names, brands, age statements, all this kind of, and he makes a very valid point, and I want to talk to you about this. He makes a very valid point about saying that talking about, you know, telling someone that this whiskey's from an ex-Apera cask, or this whiskey's from an ex-bourbon cask, whatever it is, doesn't actually tell you anything about how it will taste.
No.
And that's why it's sort of like we need to have this discussion and widen it a bit to say, well, you know, likening things to flavor elements. You, in your background, Eve, of cocktails and a flavor and a flavor-led creation, again, what would be your sort of ideal world scenario for how we go about that moving forward?
Yeah, look, I think that's interesting. I kind of partially agree. I think that knowing something is in ex-bourbon, I mean, you can extrapolate some expectations from that. And I think the society does a really good job of presenting whiskeys as a flavor profile and a number, you know, like the number, unless you're a society sort of fanatic. I mean, you know,
I wish I didn't know numbers. I'll be honest, I wish I didn't know them.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Matt, if anyone in Australia knows them, it's probably you, and I would probably guess Alex Moores as well. Yeah, I mean, you guys do a really good job of being like, hey, this is the flavor, this is the experience that we think this whiskey gives you, and I think that's really interesting. I think that's the way the way people get into enjoying whiskey. And I think the way that you start communicating that is when you are doing tastings, instead of focusing on casks, fermentation times, yeast strains.
And I love the nerdy stuff. I love the nerdy stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love talking
Me
about
too. Absolutely.
As you said at the beginning, it's like you love that focus on talking about things like this, here's Buffalo Trace, let's talk about it kind of thing.
Yeah,
whereas
100%.
And other presenters will like going, okay, how many days of fermentation does this distillery have in their regime?
Yeah,
they're very, very different audiences, and I think there's room for both.
Yeah,
the approach has to be some similarity in approach of why that's important for the end product.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, as I said before, like I love telling stories. So the thing that makes me remember kind of brands and whiskeys is learning their narrative. Yeah. And once I know their narrative, and I've always found remembering dates easy as well. So like history has always been easy to like rattle off dates of different things, right. or at least like decades. Once I remember that, then I feel like I can relate to the liquid a little bit more. And then, I mean, like knowing how old Buffalo Trace is, and knowing the kinds of casks they use and their roughly their mash bill sort of thing. Like, I know that stuff as well, but it doesn't excite me half as much as telling a story.
Yeah. And I think it's the storytelling of behind those brands and why they are what they are, which is what you and I do, which is what and that's what you do, and that's what I do in both our capacities. And I think that's what's really important, and that's why I think we're both kindred spirits of the same journey.
Yeah, I was actually. It's funny you mentioned that. Sort of like telling stories and why we think brands are significant. Because I mean, on my stream, I did blended whiskey last week. I'm talking about the history of blended whiskey.
It's a fascinating history, though. That's fantastic.
It really is. Yeah. But like, I mean, like predate single malt, which like really 1963 was the year that single malt exploded. But I mean, like you had so many distilleries, well, not distilleries, you had different, from about 1825, you had all these different brands making blended whiskey, and that's what floated Scotch whiskey for 130 years, 140 years.
I sort of last night in my stream about how that we're not taking into account timelines enough, talking about these things. We're sort of taking these things for granted. It's like single malt explosion of Glenfiddich back in 63. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. There's also, I think, so Glen Grant was also a pioneering brand in the 60s. And everyone focused on Glenfiddich, but you also had Glen Grant, and I love Glen Grant. So, no, but I mean, like, I'm trying not to spend too much time on whiskey sites, but I'm only working about 15 hours a week, so I have a lot of spare time on my hands. Right. But someone posted something saying that Johnny Walker Black Label was shite. And not to talk too much about Johnny Walker, but I just kind of left a comment being like, look, if you consider the history of it and what they've done for Scotch whiskey, you can't really disregard it. And I also think, considering most of it's Kalila, I also think it's pretty good stock as well. Like, it's decent whiskey. I enjoy it. I drink it. I have some at home, etc.
That is one of those funny things, isn't it? It's like there's a certain for a lot of whiskey drinkers, their journey sort of reaches a certain point, and they go, "Oh, I don't really like Black Label anymore. Oh, but I love Kalila." Like, hold on a second.
Yeah, yeah. No, but like, I'm trying not to like troll these sites too hard, because I just feel like I'm not gonna win every fight. I just got like, it was just overwhelming hatred for Johnny Walker, and I was just like, I think it's actually pretty good. And everyone was like, screw this guy.
It's pile on time. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think. Well, look, I don't want to go too much off topic, but I at the same time I do. But it's kind of like there's, like those, there's a lot to be said about those, Facebook groups, whiskey Facebook groups that are where it's a little bit of, it's always, you've got to be drinking something better than what is being posted before you approach. Yeah. And it's like, well, it doesn't always have to be that way. It can just be the sheer enjoyment and appreciation of what's going on in your glass. And that might be a cocktail where Black Label is the core ingredient, or that might be a 35-year-old brewer. It doesn't like there's both camps, and they both can coexist very comfortably.
Yeah, and I think I'm coming sort of full circle here. I feel like it's more of a Gaia than it is a full circle. But I mean, like,
you've reached your quota of saying Gaia for the year now. You realize that?
Yeah, thank you. Who's the poet? Anyway, doesn't matter. Yeah, more of a doesn't, uncompleted literature degree. I'm very sorry.
Ever says Scotty whilst you're thinking. There you go. Sorry.
Listen forever, Scotty Fitzsimons, my man. Yeah, coming back to flavor focus and kind of not looking at the brand anymore, but looking at what the liquid tastes like. And I think honestly, if you served Johnnie Walker Black Label blind to somebody and you put it next to other things, even $30 or $40 more expensive, it stands up. It's delicious. And I know this because when we released Twofold, we did this. We had 10 whiskeys of a similar price point to start with Twofold, all lined up, and we got to go in.
This sounds like David's dream, given where he wanted Twofold to sit in the market. This is like David's final fantasy here.
Absolutely. And like we got to go in and sit down, and I tasted all 10. And I think I picked 3 out of the lineup, which I was like, they're probably the best 3. But definitely 2. One of them was Twofold. One of them was Johnnie Walker Maker's Mark. One of them was Maker's Mark. But I could tell that Maker's Mark was bourbon, obviously. Twofold, I hadn't tasted really before, and I was really blown away with that. I couldn't pick it. And then Black Label, I knew was Black Label because I think it's like a really iconic blend. But yeah, I picked those 3 out of 10 of really impressive kind of whiskeys side by side. So, pick the flavor, don't pick the brand.
It's a really good point. And it actually reminds me of a blind tasting that was hosted by K&L Wines in the States. And this is like, I'm talking more than 10 years ago, this tasting was hosted, but it was one of the whiskeys, and it was like I think it was like a Pete and Isla kind of night. And one of the whiskeys right in the middle of the lineup was Black Bamore. So it was Black Bamore first edition.
Cool.
Even back then, 10 years ago, would have been probably close to $10,000, 10,000 pounds a bottle kind of thing. Yeah, it's widely regarded to be one of the rarest and best examples of a single malt whiskey ever made. And the blind tasting, I think it averaged like a 6.4 out of 10. These are all sort of experts tasting it and went, this is sort of like, it's a little bit oaky, it's a little bit flawed, a little bit too long in the cask, a little bit soft. It's something not right there. And then it was revealed afterwards, that's Black Bamore. And it was like, oh, right. Yeah, no, it's actually much better than that. Sorry. Yeah, I think we've got our scoring a bit out of whack here, maybe.
It's so interesting. And I think, there's stories we can tell sort of for hours about sort of things like color bias and experiments that people have done with adding like E150A
I love doing that. I love doing that.
Whiskeys and just making it progressively darker. And the darker it goes, all of a sudden people are like, it smells like Pedro Jimenez. It's like, no, it doesn't. It looks like Pedro Jimenez. It smells the same.
Your brain's playing tricks on you there.
Exactly.
Music says, I remember Whisky and Helmet did a facial tasting and got us to guess a mystery dram that was Johnny Black, which stood up pretty well. Yeah. Now, if that dram stood up pretty well against a facial lineup, that's pretty remarkable.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
It smells like good E150, says Rob. Yeah, there you go.
It smells like E150.
Good to see you, Sam Liccardi, who's joined the stream. Sam is, of course, the McHenry's Victorian ambassador.
And doing really incredible work. Sam's absolutely killing it at the moment. He's just, I'm not sure if he ever sleeps. He just seems to be active all the time, and that's incredible. Like
Sam, That's the energy and vigor of youth. Enjoy it whilst it lasts. These two old blokes are talking about the whiskey. So Sam says, is it a bit of tall poppy syndrome, perhaps with JW Black? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think and Australia has a history of hating success, almost like not hating success, but like tall poppy syndrome. So if anywhere is going to exhibit this sort of behavior, it's definitely going to be Australia. I think I mean, like Johnny Walker's an absolute titan of the industry. I mean, they're the second largest whiskey brand in the world. Previously, well, if I'm pretty I think those figures are from 2018, and I can't think of anyone that would have exceeded them since then. 18 million cases of booze a year, like 9-liter cases, which is absolutely wild.
It's wild amounts.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you have
no reason for it. It's not just price point. If it was just price point, we'd all be drinking Officer's Choice or exactly. Blends. But Miranda Marie, love you, Miranda. We love an underdog, she says.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Now, what are you drinking tonight, Sasha? Before we
I'm drinking
Mackie in your glass before.
Yeah, so one of my good friends, Nathaniel White from Angels Envy, for my birthday this year, gave me this little bottle, which is from a Californian producer. It's from a new-ish distillery called Savage and Cook. And it was started by
once more. Just I'll bring you up.
Is that there? We are.
There we go. Okay, very cool. Very cool.
So from what I understand, I think because they only really started production, I think, in 2018. So started by this guy, I've forgotten his name. Sorry, just let me look this up.
Whilst he's looking that up, actually, I'm gonna show some two embarrassing photos. Not embarrassing, don't worry. I'm gonna show up just two photos here. Of course, I had this prepared earlier. There's in his old Stalwart Element.
Yes, that's me.
That's me. And there, and you're presenting looks like wine cask, obviously very
yeah.
And of course, and then there's a great photo of us two enjoying some Irish coffees at Bar Margaux last year.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. That was a fun night, actually. I mean, all nights are fun with you, Matt. But I mean, we tried to go to Heartbreaker, and you were pulling along like a big suitcase full of whiskey with you.
I had all the stock with me still because I hadn't been to the hotel yet. No, anyway,
and you sort of like pulled it up over the curve and stumbled a little bit, and the security guard at Heartbreaker was just like, he's not allowed in. I'm like, he's fine. He's more sober than I am. Like, he's great. And they're like, he's
hosted an event just for everyone playing along at home. I literally just finished hosting an event.
Yeah,
and I had 2 ponies. What are they called? The little beers.
Pots.
Two pots of beer that night. So probably about 1.1 standard drinks over the last 4 hours or so. And I was just like, I was quite tired, but I was like, I walk across the road, my bag stumbles, and I sort of trip on myself a bit. And the security guard takes one look at that trip and goes, no, not coming in, no chance.
Look, look, we went to Margaux. We had a great night, had some food. Rob Akers was there. That's right.
He's quoting what happened that night where the bouncer said, the guy in the jacket, he was drunk.
Yeah.
I wasn't. For the record, I wasn't. It was just
look. Anyway, then we went to Margaux. We had a grand time. Sorry. The winemaker's name is Dave Finney. I'm not sure how I could forget that. He's such a incredible winemaker from the Napa Valley. I mean, he's producing some really, really, really great stuff over in California. But look, his new distillery, they are distilling their own liquid at their distillery, but this was bought in and finished in their distillery in some, I believe, Grenache casks. So it's a rye whiskey from Tennessee, which is then finished in Grenache casks, and it's pretty funky. Like, it's super kind of oily and meaty, and then it's kind of has like a lamby sort of scent with some like red fruits as well. So like
Lammy is interesting note.
Yeah, Lammy.
Yeah, okay.
You know, like
Warnock's, like bit meaty and
yeah,
fun.
yeah. No, look, it's great, and I'm actually really excited about what's going to be coming out of America in the next 5 years. I think American malt whiskey is going to be incredible in the next 5 years.
Well, here's the thing. I'm just going to counter that a little bit. I agree with you entirely. But I'd say it's actually pretty much already there on the local market there. In that, there's probably, no kidding, no less than 100 different single malt brands already on the market over there. We see maybe 2 of them here. So like we see Westland, Westward, and maybe 1 or 2 others like
Colcagen, Balcones.
Anyway. Sorry, Balcones, yes, maybe 5 here. But there's 5 out of about 100 great single malts that are being made over there.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really a cool development in spirit for the American market.
Absolutely.
And I'd argue that we're going to see a lot of interesting Scotch whiskey with the loosening of the cask usage rules that changed a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Here's a question. You know, the interviewer becomes interviewee now, Matt.
Here we go.
What do you think is going to be? Oh yeah, Woodford single malt, Miranda. Absolutely. What do you think is going to be the most prominent usage of casks? What do you predict to be the most prominent usage of casks of the casks that you are now allowed to use? Obviously, you can't say things that are already prolific like sherry and bourbon.
No.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot of interesting packaging and ideas coming out of ex-agave. It's in like ex-tequila barrels. I think that they're plentiful. There's they're available, and I don't know. I don't even fully know, and I don't think even the SWRI fully knows what that flavor is going to impart, what that looks like versus different spirits. I think it'll be unexpected, if anything. Like I'm one of those people that truly believes that Islay whiskey, like heavily peated whiskey, should generally stay away from sherry casks. I know I'm going to get shouted out on that one, but but I also believe that there is obviously some beautiful symbiosis sometimes with, and when it works really well. But but at the same time, I think things like we're going to see some lovely examples of lighter spirits that will work really well with that cask type, and I think that might be really cool to see that happen. I'd love like a 5-year-old Glen Grant, and then 2 years in an ex-tequila cask. That might be really fun. Glen Grant's a very light spirit. It's a very sort of breakfasty dram.
Yeah, 100%. I actually think that's a really good point and something that I haven't thought of. But potentially, we can see some exciting younger grain whiskey, which can be. You can do incredible things with young grain whiskey. Like the problem is, you throw grain whiskey into 6th fill casks, and then you have to wait 30 years for them to like look decent, But I think you can see some cool experimentation with grain whiskey, which I'm psyched for. I think that's going to be great.
Grain whiskey as a whole, as a category, I've said this before, hugely underrated.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
There's a question coming in. I've got one more big one for you, Sacha. Before I'm going to take an audience question. Andy asks, Sacha, being pretty much the home of experimentation whiskies, do you have any intel for Starward or anyone else for that matter, who may be doing anything clever or interesting with ex-ginger beer casks? Bit of a ginger buff here, says Andy. So you got to remember, Sacha is not at Starward anymore. He's got a role beneath Driver's Lane, but he's been involved in the whiskey industry in Australia for long enough to probably field that.
Yeah, so this is the thing which excited me about ginger beer cask when I first started working at Starwood, was, to the best of my knowledge, not many people, if any people, had been doing this before. And I'm starved to think of. I know Peter Bignell. This is slightly different. Peter Bignell at Belgrove does the ginger hammer, which is a distilled ginger beer, which he then ages, which is pretty cool. Yeah. But that's more of a ginger beer spirit. But also anything that comes from Belgrove is going to be nutty because Peter Bignell's such a mad inventor, and that's probably a cliche these days, but he's so creative with what he presents, like the apple hatchet and the dung smoked whiskey as well. Like that was pretty cool. Like anyway, so yeah, probably Bignell's the next big one. I don't really know anyone else doing ginger beer casks because I think they would come off as disingenuous if they
like,
did.
oh, Stalwart already did this kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. And I think in this
starting, there's you guys are sort of trailblazers in that.
Yeah, I think so.
A comment here from Irina that kind of disturbs me a little bit. I only drink grain whiskeys over 30 years old because I'm precious. You know what? I know you're kidding, Irina, because I've got a G13.1 somewhere in the office, which was a society grain whiskey from a Japanese distillery that was aged for 4 years and is positively one of the best grain whiskeys I've ever had. Now, we've had some old grains at society. In fact, that's most of our grain whiskeys are 30, 40 something years old. This was a 4-year-old grain whiskey from Japan that was like pink grapefruit in a glass.
Is that Miyagi-ko?
No, it's Cheetah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, look, I'm like, I think
going back a while, but yeah, we did have a lovely grain out of Cheetah or what.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, and yeah, I know you're joking, Irina, but Japanese whiskey is meant to be fresh and light and amazingly clean, and I can imagine. I've never been to a Japanese distillery, unfortunately. I really wanted to get there this year, but the current situation, it'll probably be next year now or the year after, who knows. But I think their whiskeys are meant to be delicate and kind of drunk with minimal barrel intervention and quite young. I mean,
yeah, I
think it thrives in that environment. Yeah. Did you say you had another question, Matt?
I got one more big one for you.
Okay.
So you asked me where you think the what cask type and we might see coming out of Scotland. Here's one for you. Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I reckon there's 4 eras of Australian whiskey.
Go on.
So we've got the early era, and I'm talking 1820 to about sort of 1992, or I'm going to say 1972, actually, closer to the point.
So 1920 or 1820?
No, so 1820.
Yeah.
Was whiskey being made in Australia in 1820, all the way up to about 1970, etc.
Yeah.
And we're going to go with 92. That's the first era. That's the ancient era. Then we're going to go with 92 to 2014 was the formative years.
Okay.
Then we're going to go 2014 to 2019. I'm going to call that the award years. And off the back of French Oak, Sullivan's, etc.
Yep.
But then I reckon in 2019, we've turned a bit of a corner. And I think development and research and interest in the category has matured somewhat. And we're seeing things like Gospel Rye. We're seeing Archie Rose Rye Malt. We're seeing Twofold. We're seeing products that are not just grain whiskies, of course, and not just rye whiskies and also single malts. But I think the category diversity is widening. The not just saturated whiskies entirely by tannins and small cask. We're turned a corner from that era. Where do you think, if you were to take a wild guess, what do you think you would like the Australian whiskey industry to look like in an era sense in the next 10 years, say?
What would I like it to look like? Wow, that's a big question.
Well, I mean, where would you say it could be? What do you think it looks like? I mean, given the growth we've had recently and the interest and the development.
Honestly, I think one of the big things about Australian whiskey is that you have a lot of brands which are content with being small producers and angling for that sort of boutique kind of market. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think for Australian whiskey to have the global presence, which I think it deserves, is you need some brands who are willing to, one, go through the pains of expanding and trying to produce more, and then, coming up to the problem of selling more, or coming against the problem of selling more, to really generate international support for Australian whiskey. Because outside of, you go to the UK and people know Sullivan's Cove because it's won awards. You see Hellier's Road in a few places, in a few kind of boutique shops in sort of London, and then you see Starwood now. But outside of that, Australian whiskey is not doing a huge amount. And I think if we can if we can have some brands who are willing to take that next step and then export in a significant quantity, so that to not be like coveted and hoarded like Sullivan's Cove is. Or do you see Hellier Road?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
What happened?
Someone asked a question. Did you hear that?
No, I think it was just some feedback. Sorry.
Oh, right. Anyway, sorry. It was my voice coming back to me. That's weird. Yeah, I think that's the next big thing for Australian whiskey, because people in Australia already love Australian whiskey. I think there's growth there, but I think the next big thing is getting international recognition, and we need people to be a bit more forward thinking and sort of willing to sort of expand. But I mean, like, people have different goals, and I'm not telling all companies that they need to do this, but I think that's the next big thing.
Okay, that's cool. That's all I wanted to ask.
How are we looking for time, Bailey?
I think we're just about done. I want to cap it into the hour, which is really great.
Yeah, nice.
Serena says, I've only had 1 grain whiskey over 30 years old. I'm just a swamp donkey. I don't know what swamp donkeys are, but that doesn't sound like a preferable thing to be. There are more whiskeys I like than I don't like. We love you exploring whiskeys, Irina. That's why membership has its perks, of course. Yeah. Anyone that's just going to use this opportunity now to say, of course, if you're not a member of the society and you want to join, there's the little scroll at the bottom there, bit.ly/SMWS, SMWS OS, if you like. And if you join between now and the end of July, which is only 9 or something days away, you'll go in the draw to win that bottle of 64.97, which was a Partner Bar exclusive bottling. You'll be the only member, not just in Australia, but in the world with that bottle, which is very cool. Wow. So in the meantime, I want to extend a huge thanks to Sacha for joining us tonight, for having a chat about his career, his path. Before we go, however, I had just a couple of last little slides to show for a bit of show and tell. This is sort of the lovely back bar of where Sacha is now beneath driver lane.
Yep.
Love everything you're doing there, and we're loving watching your live streams. Can you let us know? Can you let everyone watching, if they want to tune into your live stream, perhaps when is it and what time?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Matt. So every Friday night we do different flights. This week we're doing American Single Malt. Next week we're doing a flight called Goodbye Rye July with one of my good friends, Linus Shaxman from Brown Foreman. And we're going to be talking about rye whiskey and looking at some really cool releases from Jack Daniels and Woodford as well. So we've got a couple of really exciting things coming up. You can jump on our website. You can order the flight. We'll mail them out to you, or just jump on our Facebook page and you can watch along at home if you don't want to buy the flight, but you still want to learn. More than welcome to. Finally, personal plug. If you want to kind of follow Driver Lane's activities plus my activities, I'm Social Sash on Instagram. I'm trying to do a lot more content about whiskey generally, and coffee. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I'm going to do some work with coffee as well.
He's going to be doing some work with coffee, and in the next few weeks after you've done that, we're going to have Sacha back on the live. I haven't told him this yet, but we're going to talk more about coffee and flavor and pairings perhaps there, because there's something we're working on with coffee at the society at the moment, which we're very excited by. So one last comment from Chris Freed, who says, we need a native plant to make our own. USA has corn, UK barley, Asia rice, and Australia ? Chris, you'll be surprised to know that Australia produces enough barley for 60-something% of the world production of barley. So I'd say that barley is native to Australia just as it is the UK. In fact, more so because we have a higher percentage of output.
Yeah. Look, absolutely. And in terms of like native grasses, because I mean like cereal grain, I mean native grasses, you don't have enough starch in any native grass to sort of produce anything significant. So I think it's really hard to use natives. There's probably people looking into this, and I think just a really quick shout out to Adelaide Hills Distillery. Sacha over there is doing some really cool work with Australian natives.
You heard it here first. There's 2 people in the booze industry in Australia called Sacha. So I'm sorry, it's going to happen. You got to be generous of that though, because look, there's 1,000 Matts. So you know what? Having 2 Sacha, you're fine. I'm
great. Anyway, I don't want to talk too long, but Matt, thanks for having me on, man. I've had a blast. And I mean, I could talk for 3 hours with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Sacha. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And don't go anywhere, Sacha. Thank you, everyone who joined in. We'll see you all soon. Cheers.
Thank you, guys.